Perform, applaud, triumph, marvel, engage, dream.
Hello, this is Feline.
And this is Hannah.
And this is another episode of Computer Science, of course.
Computer science.
Of course. Computer science.
Of course.
This is Computer Science,
Of course.
Of course.
Hey, Feline.
Hey, Hannah, what is your connection to theater? Like, have you played in a theater? Do you like going to plays?
I'm not a theater person, but I think many of my lectures are kind of a bit of a theater or performance because I like the students to be entertained. And I also really like music performances. And in that sense, there are links to theater, but plays, not really my thing. What about you?
When I was a high school student, I did play in one Shakespeare in school. And I like to go to the theater, also to plays, but I'm not a super big theater goer.
And how does the topic link to today's episode?
Well, this is a great question. I want to discuss a book today called Computers as Theater by someone who is a theater that has a PhD in drama and then later became an interaction designer. And in this book, she's called Brenda Laurel. She tries to connect the world of theater and the world of computer, specifically human interaction design.
Yeah, I'm super excited for many reasons. One is I'm a bit from the human-computer interaction domain, but also I saw the cover of the book. This book does not look boring at all. I'm not sure what they do with computer science books. They usually look boring, in my opinion. This one looks amazing. Can you tell our listeners what you see on the cover?
Yes. Shall I also try to show it?
Yeah, let's just show it, but also tell for those who only are
that watch
listening.
the video. So I'll just briefly show it for people that are watching. What do we see? It is, I don't know how to say it. Like, is this 90s computer book style, I guess? So the cover is totally full with many things like texts. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. You're about to read a classic. Not a dead classic, but a living, vivid, evolving one. Now. And then there's on two sides, now. And then there's pillars, like the ones you have in a very old Roman amphitheater, I guess. Perform, applaud, triumph, marvel, engage, dream. And then below are just two trembling hands with pictures of hands. It has to be seen to be understood. Now, people that are listening are just, Feline is saying words. Yes, look at the cover, then you will see.
Yes, get the book. That's our first recommendation. Yeah, so what about the content? Is it equally rich?
Yes. And what I really like about this book is that it gives you a new way to look at the world, which I always very much appreciate in books. And I think this is something I missed when I was studying computer science. There's this one way of looking at the world is like in computation. How can you execute whatever is going on? But never really how do you look at it? In Dutch you can say in computer science deden we wel bouwen, maar niet beschouwen. So we did building, but not looking at is not really the right translation for beschouwen. I don't know a better English version for this word, but examining might be the closest. So there's two thoughts in the book that I think are very, very interesting. And the one thing that is interesting is that she says that when you are using a computer, you are playing a role. And I had never really thought of that. And she says that if you're in a theater and you play a role, you are still yourself. You're still in your own body, but you're also pretending to be a different person. And she says this is also what happens if you use a computer. You are still you, but you are playing someone that, for example, wants to upload an invoice into the intranet of the university to get your money back, right? You are not necessarily that person. You're playing a role. And she has this really, really nice quote. She says, both theatrical design and interface design are aimed at creating representations of worlds that are like reality, only different.
Beautiful. Yeah. But your invoice example makes me think often I feel like I'm forced into a role. I'm not allowed to choose my role. I'm forced into this role. So
And I also
maybe,
think that is this part of computer science that's maybe missing of interaction design, where we tend to describe this in terms of the user wants to upload an invoice. But then I'm so feeling you like, no, the user wants its money back, right? That's what I want. Um,
yes.
and I once read this really nice story. I think it was in Katie Sierra's book, um, How to Make Your Users Badass or something. It's a very cool book about interaction design. I think she says that very often user interfaces are designed from a happy path. Like, oh, you go on a website to book a flight because you want to book a flight. And then she was like, you have to think of the scenario in which someone's parents just died and they have to book a flight because they want to be home tomorrow with their other parent that's still alive. And then you're super stressed and you're like, oh, you get all the buttons. This is also a scenario you should design for, that someone does not want to use your website, right? They do not want to book this flight to go home to this terrible situation, but they have to. And this also made me think, this book made me think of that a little bit, that who is your user? It is not a person that necessarily wants to do the thing on the website. There is a flesh and blood person behind the screen. So this already for me, well, I don't want to say every time now I use a computer, but occasionally when I use a computer, I am thinking, what role am I playing? And what part of me is in the system? And what part of me is still in my chair, not participating? And it's also very fun that she has these two types of examples. She looks at video games and also she looks at these boring office applications as two extremes. Because in a video game, you're also playing a role. I was just playing a video game called Biped, in which you're a robot with two legs and you have to move the robot in a very specific way. And then you do play a bit that you are this robot, right? And you want a little coin at the end of the platform. So I also really like the scoping that she takes of software as a very, very broad uh, spectrum, which again, also thinking of if you learn how to design software, then you're sort of either making games and then that's separate, you study game design, or you're making boring ass office applications, but both are software. So I also really liked how she gets those things together.
Okay, and if you then think about this role a bit more, if I'm writing some paper, I feel like I have so many roles. Like I'm the author and the producer and the observer and the critic and the sometimes the person clapping at my own thoughts and sometimes the person, yeah, trashing them. There's so many roles at once. Do we design for all the roles? Um, I don't know. I
Yeah, or maybe
usually,
some programs are for some roles and other programs are for other roles. Right? If I read a paper, then I might be on my tablet making notes, which is a different software with a different role than if
yeah,
I'm writing software, which I tend to do in some sort of Word editor, Overleaf or Obsidian. Those are already different softwares for different roles. And sometimes I am reading on the screen and it never really works as well because it's not what it's for. So I guess
yeah,
the more clear you have the different roles, the better you can also align software to do the role.
yeah, nice. And is there a big difference between games and spreadsheets?
Well, I guess there is in the types of roles that it's playing or showing. And there was this one other sort of related quote. This is a quote from Laurel, but from someone else quoted in the paper. She says, in his book, The Elements of Friendly Software Design, Paul Heckel remarks, when I design a project, I think of my program as giving a performance for its user.
Oh,
So in that sense, I do think a game is giving a much different performance, and maybe also game design is more thinking about the performance it's giving. I don't think many people design their spreadsheets or IDEs or word processors as this is a thing giving a performance, right? It's really stringing you along like here's something and here's something else and this is maybe also something you want. It's just woof, here are all the features.
yeah. It's maybe more providing a stage rather than a performance. I'm not sure. Like a spreadsheet to me feels a bit more like here's your stage, do your thing.
Yes.
But That's nuance. Yeah. So this was the first angle that really changed your perspective of computer science. What's the second?
So can I do an intermediate, especially
Yes.
for you? I have
Yes.
one quote where I wrote, "This is for Hannah." Here, this is for Hannah.
Oh, we should have this every episode. Can we have every episode the quote for Hannah moment? And we'll
Yes,
get
let's
a
do it.
little
Okay, this is
jingle.
something. This is my gift to you, or it's more a question actually to you. So she says, consider the following question. What is being represented by a human computer interface? And then she gives options. It is a multiple choice Hannah question. So she says, 1, a way for a person to communicate with a computer. 2, a way for a computer to communicate with a person. 3, a surface through which humans and computers can communicate. 4, a way for humans and computers to construct actions together.
Oh, this is why I don't like multiple choice. Can't, can't it be all four? I think
You see,
three and four,
then
I'm a
goes
bit torn.
to an explanation that's well, maybe a bit of this and maybe a bit of this. But I thought this was such a great question that you can look
Yeah.
at this question and you're like, what is an interface? And I think maybe this goes a little bit to what you were just saying about, is it a performance or is it a stage? If you say human computer interaction is a way for humans and computers to do something together, and
Yeah.
it is much more a stage, right? And it is
Yes.
inviting you, the user, to do something, and the computer does something. And of course, um, last episode we talked about AI, I guess. Every episode we will talk about AI. Um, that is constructing actions together is maybe something that an algorithm in some cases or a generative AI could do. But then what type of interface does it require? Now, what are you constructing together if you're chatting with ChatGPT? Are you constructing that conversation? Or are you constructing something else, like a program or a paper or an essay? Are you constructing something in a different window or a different software while having a conversation? And indeed, also these first two options. Is the computer communicating something to the human or the other way around? I thought I just wrote, this is for Hannah. I
Yes.
want to hear her thoughts on this.
Yeah. If I have to choose one, I would go with three, maybe four. Definitely not just one or two. That would be too one-sided. Um, if it's like one directional communication, it's not really communication, I think. Yeah. So I'm glad it's not a multiple choice in reality, but wonderful question indeed.
And I think, like you of course, from this field, but I think this is something that's glanced over if you get a little bit of interaction design, if you're in
Yes.
a computer science program, or if you're learning to be a programmer in a different way. It is sort of assumed that you understand what an interface is for. Reading this, I thought, I don't know. I
Yeah.
have never thought of making an interface, not even for ADI, which is this programming system that I worked on for a very long time, every day for a few years. I had never looked at it from this perspective. Like, am I allowing you to communicate with the computer, or is the computer communicating something to you? Of course, both these things, right? But
Yep.
I thought this was so cool. And it doesn't necessarily have something to do with the theater. So that's maybe, I don't want to say criticism of the book because I really enjoyed reading it, but the cover is somewhat like the inside of the book. That it is poof, 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 poof. Here are many thoughts. And yeah, good luck with these thoughts. And many of these thoughts were like, oh, this is so cool. I would have rather had 5 of these with some story than pew, pew, pew. But you get what you get, and there were so many cool thoughts in this book.
Oh, give us another one.
Okay, cool. I have so many. So here's one, not necessarily about theater, a bit broader, about art. So she says, I don't know if this is always true, I'm not an artist, but she says, art is the external representation of things that happen in the head of the artist. Art forms differ in the terms of the materials they employ and the way that the representations are created, and different powers have different forms have different powers. And then I wrote here, this fits really nicely with Peter Nauer that we discussed last time, that if you create something, whether this is art or whether this is a computer program, then this is a representation of things you were thinking. I don't know if this is always true. I was also thinking, oh, Jackson Pollock dripping the paint, right? Is this now necessarily something that goes on in his head? But I did think it was very interesting. And also this different materials have different effects on people. This is also, I think, very true for user interfaces, but we don't necessarily think of that so much. We're also very, very instrumental, like, oh, we need a button, but only just what a button looks like, right, is really very different. And somehow I was thinking of Tinder with this, because there could have been a yes/no button, but then they chose, I don't know why, to do swiping instead of just a simple button. And then this turns into popular culture, right? Oh, I swipe right on this. Apparently, this form of user interface does something different than thumbs up or thumbs down or a sad smiley. But specifically, I was thinking of Peter Nauer and this: what you make expresses what you think.
Yeah. But I would agree with your constraint that art maybe isn't always like that. There's much more embodied art that's not really related to thinking that much and to representation one has in a brain, but more something that you have in your entire body. So I wouldn't agree with this definition of art, but I agree with your application to the Peter Nauer.
Yes, and also this application. I mean, she says so many things that almost like, yeah, of course, right? Of course, different materials have different impact on whoever's viewing it, but because she of course does this in a computer sphere, she applies it a bit there, then it makes sense. So
Yes.
these were a bit snacky quotes. Then now we go on to the second idea from the book that I really liked. So this first idea is you play a role if you use a computer, like in a play. The other big idea she has is that she tries to look at the text of a play as a computer program. Because she says the text of a play is something that still has to be executed by people. Only a play, only the text of a play, the screen text, isn't a play. It is a play. It could become a play. And then if once people start executing the play, they have to make all sorts of decisions, right? Because not everything is in the screenplay. There's the story and who says what, but there isn't always what body language and who says where and how do you look at people. So she says this is like a program. It's not software yet. It still has to be executed. And then she compares this screenplay to a program. So she says a program, a computer program, is a set of instructions that defines the potential actions that make up a human computer activity and their representations. So just to clarify, she's not necessarily saying computer code still has to be executed and then it's running, right? Because there's no decisions there. Her scope is wider. She says a computer program is executed not by the compiler and the CPU, but by the person interacting with the computer. And then they also consistently have to make decisions and they have to fill holes that are not exactly in the program, just as actors have to fill holes, have to decide on body language while using the play. That I also thought is so interesting because we're always thinking, at least how I've been trained, thinking of executing a program means running the program. Executing a program does not mean actions that make up a human computer activity and the representation. We never think of a program being executed because a person pushes a button. Like the execution never includes this. So here again, I was thinking, this theater person is making me look at software all differently, which is why I like interdisciplinary thinking so much.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. That is very much what we try to teach in the human-computer interaction, but I've never seen it expressed so clearly.
Yes. And she quotes here, if I may do one more quote, she quotes Professor Julian Hilton, not Hinton, Professor Julian Hilton says, the text of a play is a combination of explicit and implicit notational systems, which have as their initial purpose the enablement of an event in which performance and audience can share as partners. Yes, right. The programmer or the program is a participant, maybe the actor, and then the audience is participating. She talks about that also very often, that an audience is not just sitting, but they are participating, clapping, being silent, breathing. They are also participating. And of course, here again are notational systems. So it's again a little hat tip, I think, to Peter Nauer. A play is also a notational system, and it has to be appended by human activity. So this is the two thoughts from this book. I was like, wow, this is so cool.
Yes. Oh, you convinced me. Now I have to read it. Um, is there anything in this book maybe where you think, oh, she should have talked to a computer scientist before writing this down? This doesn't seem to make too much sense. Or, yeah, maybe something weird? Is there
Yeah,
something weird?
yeah. So this is, of course, also the downside of interdisciplinary work, that very often, understandably, right, the depth to which they can go in certain areas is just not as deep as we could go. But then, of course, we're missing other things. Here I have one quote where I was like, I would have liked more meat on the bones here. And this is about AI. She says, can computers think? Can computers think? She says, there's an easy way out of it. Computer-based agents, like dramatic characters, don't have to think. They simply have to provide a representation from which thought may be inferred.
Mm,
Mm,
well,
right?
yes.
Mm. And then, of course, she isn't talking about the AI as we have it now. The example is now if I double click a folder and this opens, then the system is doing something. So she's talking about software in a way different way. But I do think people infer thought all the time. But the computer, I think, plays a bigger role than just saying, oh, here's a representation. So I thought, I want to hear more about this. Even then, there was AI to a certain extent, and there were people working on this. So rather than, I think, just having her own hypothesis on what representation is, chatting with computer people would have maybe have made a difference there. So it touched the surface, but it misses the fact that when people are interacting with a computer, they are doing something.
Yeah. Which is exactly what she in the other points emphasizes. So it's surprising she's not really going in depth here. But okay, that we can forgive.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, absolutely. Right. Because this is
yes.
probably, if I would write a book on theater, it would be much worse. And she is giving so many nuggets of thinking, right? So many ideas or germs of an idea, like, oh, but you could also look at it this way. So I will definitely forgive her. But these are some things where I'm like, I would just like to have more.
Yes. And how do you think this book could affect computer science education?
Oh, that's a great question. So only the middle HANA part that we did, right? A
Yes.
course. So I had one course about human computer interaction, but it was really just like making buttons and making pop-ups.
Oh, no.
Uh,
That's not my course.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not, right. Maybe now things are also different. Maybe then it was a bit more flat, but it was almost always given by computer science people. So just this notion of, but what are we trying to do? What are we trying to build? What are we trying to convey? Is this software, and maybe this multiple choice question that we have, all those softwares, I think, exist. Sometimes a compiler is very different from a word um, processor. So just this notion of what is it we're building? What do we want the user to do? Um, that would be very interesting. And picking apart interfaces, just looking at a program. I have my high schoolers do this, and it's a very, very useful way to talk about user interfaces. I have them go to our learning management system called Magister, which is a bit like Canvas for teenagers. And I have them describe like what is there, what do the buttons do, what are the features that this program has, and they go to this program every day, and then they do find new things like, oh, there's a button here. So less focused, computer science education also less focused on building and more focused on what is this thing trying to do? What is it trying to tell me? What is it trying to convey, or which representations does it allow? I think that would be useful.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe if someone's listening thinking, I want to practice this a little bit, maybe can we make a concrete assignment for everyone? Not everyone has access to this program you just described. What would be, I guess it could be anything, but if you want a shared experience for all the listeners, let's pick some software where they can do this.
Yeah, so an
Um,
emailing program, maybe, right?
yeah,
Everyone has something. It doesn't have to be Outlook or Gmail. It doesn't matter. So go to your email program, and you can do it very instrumentally. Like, this is what my high schoolers do. Like, what are the features? But just this question of what is the performance that you and the program together are giving? And that's a tough question, right? This is not easy. Computer science people will be like, but what does
yes,
this mean? It doesn't
yes.
matter, right? It doesn't matter what it means. There isn't a meaning. This is a way of thinking. There isn't a right and wrong answer. I think this would be really interesting. And I was thinking about this in the context of Hedy, which is this programming language and associated platform for children that I built. I was also thinking, what is the performance that this thing gives? Like, is it teaching you? It does. Is it enabling you to be a programmer? It does. Are those two features in contrast with each other? Maybe sometimes. Um, so I think that is a very interesting activity to look at an interface and to maybe go to these 4 points of what is this interface, in which of the 4 categories does it fall most? That's like part 1 of the episode a bit, and then part 2, what is the performance that it's giving? I think that would be such a cool way to look at software and such a good exercise for students in any
Yeah.
programming course. I don't even think this necessarily has to be a human computer interfaces course.
No, everyone can do it. You don't have to be any way related to computer science. I can just ask
Yeah.
my neighbor. This is a very universal exercise. I really like it. Oh, I imagine this is also the direction we will go for the homework. But before we go to the homework, is there anything else about the book you want to tell us? Any notes you took? Any margin scribbles? Any highlights, hearts that our readers should know about?
Yeah, so one thing that surprised me, and I wrote down, I have to dive into this, but then you never do, of course. So maybe people that are listening can help you out here. She says quite early in the book, psychologists have been involved in the quest to understand human computer interaction since the beginning of computing through such disciplines as human factors design. So then I thought, I don't know in the current day and age many psychologists who are still involved in this. So where did they go? And I have one more quote about AI that I think is really good, specifically on the connection between what we now call AI because we talk about text models, about LLMs all the time. She says, a simplistic notion of conversation led many early interface specialists to develop a model of interaction that treats human and computer as two distinct parties that have a conversation through the screen. But dialogue is not just linearized turn taking in which I say something and then you think about it and then you say something and I go think about it and so on. So this, I think, is like, but that is exactly now, Brenda Laurel, exactly now how software is made. So she's like, no, that's a thing of the past. Now we're much more advanced and we treat user interfaces much differently. Maybe we did then, but now it's like, no, it's now it's very different. And then she talks about different modes of interaction, like playing a duet or shaking hands or doing a tango. These are also collaborations, but they're, of course, very different from just a simple conversation. And then somehow the pendulum swung back to having a conversation mediated by a screen. So there it's just like, oh, that is interesting. And then she quotes someone else, Clark and Brennan, about this tango and waltz and chess piece. And this quote ends, I also wrote down something there. She says, if people are doing these things together, like playing chess or dancing, they need to coordinate on process. They need to update, revise their common ground by the moment. And then here I wrote down, but if you're chatting with the text model, only you are doing this, right? Only the
Yes.
person is finding the common ground. Like, no, this is wrong. And then the thing says, oh, I made a mistake. Let's go again. But it doesn't really change this internal notion. So I thought this is also interesting how she both describes that computer interaction isn't just a conversation. It's much more like a tango or playing chess or shaking hands. But then that process requires two parties to play, which in current LLMs, there's just only one person playing. So this also a thought. Of course, you cannot read anything in 2026 and not think about AI, where I'm like, yeah, the world is different, but also exactly the same, but with less psychologists participating, apparently.
Oh, yes. But I love the common ground and the coordination idea. Definitely something that we lack in our interaction with LLMs. Yeah, okay. We have discussed many of these ping, 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 ping ideas. Um, yes, of course, everyone can read the book. But if they want more concrete homework, do you have something in mind?
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading the whole book because I think we took the highlights from a computer science perspective, and also it's very it's very long. It's much longer than the work we covered last time. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this as homework. I do think that things we covered, like what does a system do, already is interesting, but maybe this last part also gives rise to a question that if you are using software, you could write down while using the software, when are you updating or revising this common ground? I think that's also a very interesting way to examine friction in a system. So you're trying to do a thing, you click a button, you do, and let's stay in this invoice system story. Oh, you click new registration, but then you shouldn't have done this because I don't know, the travel department makes a new registration. You should have picked new trip or something, right? So you do something and then it doesn't work, and you have to revise this common ground between you and the system. I don't think these are things that are often given as feedback to people that make software, right? Not necessarily this button didn't do what I thought it would do, but I had to now update my mental model. Could you have communicated this mental model differently? Not just make the button a different word, but think of your performance. So yeah, maybe for computer science people, think more like a user. And if you're experiencing something as a user, then there are some useful theoretical frameworks in this book to see yourself as a user of software. And then maybe that will also allow you to become a better creator of software.
Excellent. And just because you use the word friction, I want to pitch in here and say, usually it's seen something as something bad, but I really think we don't have enough friction in software and in our digital world. There should be more friction. So if you notice friction in your analysis, think about, is it good friction or is maybe something too smooth? Too smooth can also be a problem. So yeah, friction is great. Think about it. That's
Yes,
my
it is a useful source of information, and definitely some systems, not travel upload systems, but LLMs maybe, or even word processors might need friction. But friction
exactly.
is also thinking, or an invitation to thinking.
Yes. Uh, Great way to end the episode, but let's tell them the listeners? What will we discuss next time?
Yeah, so I was thinking next time we can do the Turing test paper, the original paper by Alan Turing, in which he proposes the imitation game that we now know as the Turing test. It is to a certain extent less computer science, of course, because it's very much computer science, even though it wasn't invented in the 50s. But it is something that I had never read in my studies, and I think there's a lot of interesting things that computer science people might not know. So I think I want to pitch it as enough, of course, to do it next time.
Let's do it next time. I'm on board. Hey, Feline, it's me, Hannah. I'm here again with the homework. Or actually, I again didn't really do the homework you suggested and did something else instead. I guess I went off course. So, what did I do? First of all, I reflected a little bit on this idea of how I see the computer. So, of course, we discussed that Brenda Laurel sees it as a theater. And then I personally realized I see it more as a gym or as a fitness center. So, let me explain. First of all, I find working with the computer super exhausting. And that's not all. There's a few more parallels I want to draw. For instance, think about all these emails that come in and that need to be answered. This is really like the stairmaster in the gym, where you conquer one of these stairs and then more stairs keep coming, and it's just this endless flow of stairs, an endless flow of emails. Then there's Microsoft Teams. We have all these online group meetings and everyone is dying on the inside and it's just like a spinning class. So you spend all this energy and effort, but in the end, you really didn't get anywhere. You're still exactly where you started at the beginning of the gym class. You're still in the same room, even though you spent all this energy. And this is, of course, what these online group meetings often do. You spend a lot of energy and you actually get nowhere. And then there's these applications like Slack and Mattermost and all these communication platforms. And while I love them, I essentially feel like hanging out on these platforms is a bit like hanging out on this elliptical, while you're actually on the phone with your best friend and you're just kind of pretending to work out and you're fooling yourself that you're getting a workout in while you're just really killing time and enjoying this time with your good friends. And I feel the same thing on these communication platforms where there's this guilt of not actually putting in the hard work and just hanging out and not really getting things done. And then, of course, on these computers, there's always these processes running in the background. And this is really like the music in the gym that's just always there and running. And sometimes you notice it, but there's not really much you can do about it. I also thought about these 4 options you gave me with your multiple choice question, which was quite a challenge. So, just as a reminder, you asked me what is being represented by a human computer interface? And you gave me those 4 options from Brenda Laurel's book. And you said is it a way for a person to communicate with a computer? Is it a way for a computer to communicate with a person? Is it a service through which humans and computers can communicate? Or is it a way for humans and computers to construct actions together? And then when I think about this, I think one option is missing, a fifth option is missing, a fifth answer is missing. I use the computer mostly as an interface to communicate with other humans. So it's a service through which humans and other humans can communicate, or it's a way for humans and other humans, remote humans, to construct actions together. But in the end, yeah, I personally use a computer mostly as a means to somehow connect or collaborate with other people. So answering emails in Thunderbird, writing scientific papers on Overleaf, playing a game against another person, putting things on YouTube, reading documents my students send me, or posting on LinkedIn, it's all a way to connect with others, to co-create with others, or to get human attention or to give human attention. And it's not so much about creating with the computer. So I think often the computer really goes into the background. But then again, of course, this kind of fits this theater theme where actors interact with each other on stage. So I don't think this is contradicting at all um, what Brenda said. It's just that I somehow missed this from these 4 options you gave me. Then as a third thing, I reflected on this idea of a shared performance between a user or as she would say, an interactor and a computer. And I think this is something I can relate to when I use my to-do app. So basically, whenever I put a to-do in my to-do app, I feel like there's this problem that needs to be solved. And then I get to be the hero who solves that problem. And of course, I need to open all kinds of other computer programs. So with these computer programs, I have to slay many, many metaphorical dragons. But then when I'm done and I can put this little check mark, there's this relief and I'm proud. And there's this feeling of closure that I also really get from good stories. So in that sense, I think my to-do app is a great app and it has this whole drama built in. I think I've said enough. As always, if you, the listeners, have done the homework or if you had your own ideas or feedback, we would love to hear from you. I'm looking forward to hearing from you and, of course, to our next episode.